Now, the kind of like the last algebraic differentiation rule you need to know is called the quotient rule. The word quotient means something divided by something lah. It's a fraction. Okay, so how to recognize? Okay, so same thing again. Recognize you need to use quotient rule, and secondly, know how to do it. Okay, so how do you recognize that you need to use quotient rule? There is something with x at the numerator, and there's something with x at the denominator. Okay, so you must realize that, or rather, I'm going to call the one on top lah, and I'm going to call the one below bottom. Okay, but let me emphasize something first. Two things. The very first thing is you need to understand that you use quotient rule only when numerator has x, denominator has x. What do I mean? If you go back to chain rule, one of my examples previously, especially question 4, this one over here. Okay, a lot of you will use quotient rule for this, but there is no need to use quotient rule for this because the one on top has no x. Okay, so a lot of you will use quotient rule for this. Now, if you use quotient rule for this, it is not wrong. It's just that later when you differentiate the 4, please remember it's 0. Okay, I will talk about this question later on again using quotient rule. But for now, I go back down to this, talk about how to use quotient rule first. Okay, so you recognize there's something with x on top, something with x below. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to say just now was there are certain instances where the numerator got no x. Please don't use quotient rule. The second one I want to talk about is all quotient rule questions, technically speaking, you can use product rule. What do I mean? This one over here is actually 3x plus 2 times x minus 4 power negative 1. You bring the x minus 4 up. You can make it into a product and you use product rule. But please don't do this because you will face a lot of troubles if you don't want to learn quotient rule and you use this product rule method. Okay, so try your best to understand and do quotient rule right from the very start. It will help you a lot. Okay, so let's talk about how to use quotient rule. Okay, so what you need to remember is this lingo here. Okay, so bottom d top minus top d bottom over bottom squared. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down slowly. Bottom means that I write down x minus 4. Okay, I write down x minus 4. Differentiate top. When I say d top, bottom d top, I mean differentiate the top. When I differentiate the top, I get 3. So bottom d top minus top d bottom. Top is 3x plus 2. The bottom is differentiate the bottom, which is 1. Because when you differentiate x minus 4, you get 1. So this is bottom d top minus top d bottom. Over bottom x minus 4 squared. Okay, so that's my quotient rule. For this, you just need to simplify. 3x minus 12. Okay, take note, this sign over here is minus, okay? So when you expand, please expand correctly. Minus 3x minus 2. Over x minus 4 squared. Now, in Emaths, every time you have, like, for example, x minus 4 squared at the denominator, you don't go and expand. Don't expand. So same thing here, don't expand. Don't need to expand. If you expand wrongly, we minus mark. Okay, so don't expand. And that's all. Okay, so bottom d top minus top d bottom over bottom square. Okay, so like I mentioned just now, usually what we will want you to do is to only use this when there's x on top and when there's x below. Okay, but what happens if you decide to use quotient rule for the one that I use chain rule for? So if I go back to this question over here, if you decide to use quotient rule, okay, what will this look like? So bottom the top. When you differentiate the top, the 4 is 0, okay? Bottom the top. Maybe I write it down here. Bottom the top minus top the bottom. The differentiate bottom is chain rule. So power bring down, power minus 1 times differentiate inside, the 4. So it's bottom d top minus top d bottom over bottom square. Okay, so the very first thing I want to emphasize is this entire thing here becomes 0, not there anymore. Okay, then the one at the numerator becomes negative 4 times 3, 12, 12 times 4, 48. Denominator is 4x minus 1 to the power of 6 because you power 3 then power 2. And this one over here, you simplify. This whole thing can cancel. This one power 4. You end up with negative 48. 4x minus 1 power 4, which is what I have here. Same. Okay, so if you want to use quotient rule, also can. In fact, I won't force you to not use quotient rule because some of you really prefer quotient rule if you don't want to use chain rule for questions like this. But please remember, differentiate a number on top is 0 and you times 0 is 0. Okay, trust me, if you decide to do this, some of you will make this mistake one. You will forget that there's a 0 there. You actually go and times 4, for example.